Have you ever wondered what happens when karma doesn't just knock on the door, but kicks it down? Imagine this. A powerful CEO, Ethan, stands at the city's most glamorous gala, his arm wrapped around his new, younger girlfriend, the very woman he left his wife for. He feels invincible. But then, the doors swing open. A woman walks in, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. It's his ex-wife, Emily, the quiet, supportive woman he cast aside. But tonight, she's not just a ghost from his past. She's the gala's biggest secret, the lead investor everyone has been waiting to meet. What happens when the woman he thought he destroyed comes back to own his world? Stay with us as we unfold a story of ultimate betrayal, stunning transformation, and delicious revenge. The chandeliers of the grand ballroom at the Astoria dripped crystals like frozen tears, casting a fractured golden light over the city's elite. Ethan Hayes adjusted his black bow tie, the silk cool against his skin. Beside him, Sophia Reed, a vision in emerald green, squeezed his arm, her eyes wide with the avarice of a newcomer who had finally been granted a seat at the table. "It's even more beautiful than the pictures," she whispered, her voice a breathy mix of awe and ambition. "Don't get used to it," Ethan teased, though a current of pride ran through him. "This is the Orion Foundation Gala. It's the top of the food chain." He was a vice president at Sterling Corp, a titan of private equity, and this was his world. Bringing Sophia here was a statement, a public christening of their relationship. It had been 2 years since his divorce from Emily, 2 years of shedding his old, quiet life like a skin he'd outgrown. He scanned the room, nodding at familiar faces, accepting handshakes from men who measured worth in market percentages and stock valuations. He felt a potent sense of arrival. His life with Emily had been comfortable, predictable. She was the steady, supportive bedrock upon which he'd built his career, the quiet partner who managed their home, his schedule, and his social obligations with seamless efficiency. But her quietness had eventually felt like a cage, her predictability a weight. Sophia was different. She was vibrant, demanding, a beautiful, high-strung thoroughbred who made him feel young and powerful. "Oh look, there's Marcus Thorne from Thorne Industries," Sophia said, her fingers tightening on his arm. "Should we go say hello?" "Later," Ethan murmured, his eyes fixed on the grand entrance. He was waiting for the guest of honor. The gala was abuzz with rumors about a new, mysterious benefactor who had single-handedly financed the foundation's new children's wing. No one seemed to know who it was, only that they were a major player in the tech world, the CEO of a company called Aura Innovations that had come out of nowhere and was now dominating the AI wellness space. Sterling Corp had even tried to get a meeting, but had been politely rebuffed. The master of ceremonies, a suave television personality, stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. Tonight we have shattered every fundraising record in the Foundation's history, and that is thanks in large part to one individual's incredible generosity." A hush fell over the crowd. Ethan felt Sophia lean into him, her excitement palpable. This was the moment. He wanted to see who this mystery CEO was, to size up the new competition, perhaps even find an angle for a future acquisition. "She is a visionary, a trailblazer, and a testament to the power of resilience," the MC continued, his voice booming through the ballroom. "It is my profound honor to introduce the lead benefactor of the Orion Foundation and the CEO of Aura Innovations, Ms. Emily Vance." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. It couldn't be. Vance was her maiden name. He hadn't heard it spoken in years. He felt the blood drain from his face, his heart hammering against his ribs in a frantic, panicked rhythm. It had to be a coincidence. A different Emily Vance. But then, the grand doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open, and she walked in. The room, for a moment, seemed to hold its collective breath. This was not the Emily he remembered. The woman who had once favored soft cardigans and practical footwear was gone. In her place stood a woman sculpted from steel and starlight. She wore a bespoke gown of deep sapphire that shimmered with every step, its clean architectural lines accentuating a strength he had never known she possessed. Her hair, once kept in a simple shoulder-length cut, was now a sleek, dark cascade that fell over one bare shoulder. Her face was the same, yet entirely different. The gentle softness had been planned away, revealing elegant, determined angles. There was a confidence in her eyes, a cool, unshakable calm that made the air around her seem to crackle. She wasn't just present, she owned the space she occupied. Ethan froze. His hand, which had been resting on Sophia's back, fell slack. Every polished, rehearsed line of conversation, every ounce of his carefully constructed confidence evaporated. He was suddenly, terrifyingly naked under the weight of her gaze, which swept over the room before briefly and dismissively landing on him. "Who is that?" Sophia asked, her voice sharp with an instinctual feminine alarm. Ethan couldn't answer. His throat was tight, his mind a maelstrom of confusion and a primal, gut-wrenching dread. It was her, the Emily he had left, the Emily he had told himself was weak, dependent, and incapable of thriving without him. The woman he had pitied. And as she began to walk toward the stage, the crowd parting before her like the sea before a queen, Ethan Hayes, vice president of Sterling Corp., understood with a sickening certainty that he had made the most catastrophic miscalculation of his entire life. The woman he had thrown away hadn't just survived. She had been reborn in fire, and she had returned to burn his world to the ground. Their old life had been built on a foundation of quiet routines and shared glances. The small two-story colonial in Westchester had been their sanctuary, its walls saturated with the scent of Emily's baking and the faint woody aroma of Ethan's aftershave. He remembered Sunday mornings, the heavy quiet broken only by the rustle of the New York Times and the soft clink of ceramic mugs. Emily would sit curled in the armchair, her feet tucked beneath her, a gentle smile playing on her lips as she read. He used to find that smile comforting. It was a sign of contentment, of a life running on smooth, predictable tracks. He had loved her, or at least he had loved the idea of her. Emily Vance was brilliant, a summa cum laude graduate in computer science and cognitive psychology from Stanford. When they met, she was working on a groundbreaking thesis about biometric feedback loops in user interface design. She spoke of technology not as a tool, but as an extension of human consciousness, a way to heal and connect. He had been captivated by her mind. But the corporate world of New York had its own gravitational pull. Ethan's ambition was a ravenous beast. He climbed the ladder at Sterling Corp with a relentless focus, and Emily, with her quiet support, was the perfect partner. When he was promoted to senior analyst, she put her own postgraduate research on hold to help him manage the increased social demands of his role. When he made junior partner, she was the one who found their house in Westchester, turning it into a haven he could retreat to after brutal weeks in the city. She learned the names of the board members' wives, remembered their children's birthdays, and hosted elegant dinners where she moved with a grace that made his colleagues' wives look garish and loud. She had become his silent architect, building the scaffolding of his success while her own blueprints gathered dust. He never asked her to stop her work. She simply did. The language of her passion, once filled with algorithms and neural networks, softened into a vocabulary of dinner parties, garden plans, and his dry cleaning schedule. And he had let it happen. It was easier that way. Her ambition had been a dazzling, almost intimidating fire. Its embers were far more comfortable to live with. The shift was gradual. The contentment he once cherished began to feel like stagnation. Her quiet smile no longer seemed serene, it seemed resigned. He started staying later in the city, manufacturing excuses about deadlines and client meetings. The truth was, the sterile, high-stakes environment of his office felt more alive than his beautiful, quiet home. Then came Sophia. She was an intern in the marketing department, 24 years old and burning with an unvarnished ambition that reminded him of himself. She looked at him not as a husband, a partner in domesticity, but as a titan. Her admiration was a drug, intoxicating and addictive. Their affair started with late-night drinks under the guise of mentorship, escalating quickly into furtive meetings in boutique hotels and whispered promises in the back of cabs. With Sophia, he felt seen. He felt powerful. He convinced himself this wasn't just a sordid affair, it was a course correction. He was choosing life, vibrancy, a future that matched his station over a past that felt like a beautifully furnished museum of a man he no longer was. The discovery was not a dramatic, tear-filled confrontation. It was quiet, just like Emily. He came home one Tuesday evening to find a small velvet jewelry box on his pillow. It was from a designer Sophia adored, one he had bought a necklace from just the week before. Inside was not the necklace, but the credit card receipt. He found Emily in the spare room, the one that had once been her office. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes of her old research papers and textbooks. She looked up at him, her eyes not filled with tears, but with a hollow, desolate clarity. "I kept thinking about my thesis," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. It was about predictive emotional modeling, using data to foresee a user's next move, their next feeling. It's ironic. I can write code that predicts the behavior of 1,000,000 strangers, but I couldn't see this. He started with the usual clumsy lies. It was a mistake, a gift for his assistant, a misunderstanding. But she just looked at him, that quiet, steady gaze dissecting him, stripping away the layers of his self-deception. "The lie isn't the affair, Ethan," she said finally. "The lie is that you ever respected me. You didn't want a partner. You wanted an administrator for your life, someone to handle the domestic ledger so you could focus on the corporate one." She stood up, brushing dust from her slacks. "You saw my support as my function, not my choice, and now you've made my choice for me." The divorce was swift and surgically clean. She asked for nothing but her personal effects and for the house to be sold. He had tried to be generous, offering a substantial settlement, but his lawyer came back stunned. "She refused it, Ethan, all of it. She said she wants to earn her own way." He had felt a strange mix of relief and pity. It was noble, foolishly so. How could she, after a decade out of her field, possibly survive? He imagined her taking a low-level coding job somewhere, living in a small apartment, a shadow of the woman she had been. That image soothed his guilt. He had broken her, yes, but he had set her free in a way. He was the strong one, the survivor. He had a responsibility to move on, to live the life he deserved. Now, standing in the opulent ballroom, with Sophia's hand like a brand on his arm, he saw the truth. He hadn't set her free. He had unleashed her. The quiet smile, the supportive glances, the seamless management of his life. It wasn't weakness. It was the deliberate, controlled suppression of a force of nature. And he, in his arrogance, had just opened the floodgates. The applause for Emily was a wave of sound that seemed to physically push Ethan back. It was thunderous, genuine. These people, his people, were celebrating the woman he had discarded as a relic. He watched, mesmerized and horrified, as she ascended the small set of stairs to the stage. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of absolute confidence. She reached the podium and smiled at the MC, a small, genuine smile that was nothing like the placid one he remembered. This one had an edge, a glint of something sharp and brilliant. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone. It was the same voice that had once whispered good night to him, that had asked if he wanted coffee. Now it commanded the attention of a room full of millionaires and billionaires. "Thank you to the Orion Foundation for the incredible work you do. I started Aura Innovations with a simple belief that technology should serve our humanity, not diminish it. It should be a tool for wellness, for connection, for understanding ourselves better. Ethan's mind raced. Aura Innovations. He'd read the briefs. The company's flagship product was a revolutionary app that used biometric data from wearables to create personalized mental wellness programs. It was lauded for its empathetic AI, its intuitive design, and its staggering user adoption rates. It was the company Sterling Corp was desperate to get in a room with. His team had prepared a multi-million-dollar preliminary acquisition offer, and it was hers. All of it was hers. "We have a responsibility," Emily continued, her gaze sweeping the room, "to build a future that is not only smarter but kinder. The work being done at the new children's wing is the epitome of that kindness. It's an honor to be a small part of it. Thank you." She kept it short, powerful, and humble. The room erupted again. As she walked off the stage, she was immediately swarmed. Marcus Thorne, the man Sophia had been so desperate to meet, was the first to reach her, shaking her hand with an expression of deep respect. Others followed, forming a veritable court around her. "Ethan? Ethan, what is wrong with you?" Sophia's voice snapped him out of his trance. Her face was a mask of confusion and irritation. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Do you know her?" "She's my ex-wife," he managed to say, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Sophia's perfectly made-up face went blank. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. The emerald green dress, which had seemed so vibrant moments before, now looked gaudy, cheap. Your ex-wife? The one you said was a homemaker?" "That's what she was," Ethan insisted, a defensive heat rising in his neck. But the words sounded hollow even to him. The crowd around Emily began to shift, and suddenly a path cleared. She was walking towards them, or rather, she was walking towards the bar, and they were simply in her path. For a terrifying second, Ethan thought she would ignore them completely. That would have been a clean cut. But she stopped. She looked at him, her eyes cool and analytical, as if she were examining a piece of code for flaws. There was no anger, no pain, just a placid, unnerving assessment. "Ethan," she said, her voice even. It was the first time she had said his name in 2 years. It felt alien. "Emily," he croaked, You look incredible. I had no idea." "Yes, that was always the problem, wasn't it?" she replied, a faint, ironic smile touching her lips. Her gaze then flickered to Sophia, taking in the designer dress, the nervous posture, the proprietary hand on Ethan's arm. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a greeting, it was an acknowledgement, a dismissal. "I see you're keeping with the same model, just a newer version." Sophia flushed, a splotchy, unbecoming red that clashed with her dress. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" Emily's eyes were back on Ethan. "She's ambitious, she admires your position, and she makes you feel powerful. It's a predictable pattern. You of all people should appreciate the efficiency of a good algorithm." Before Ethan could formulate a response, to defend Sophia or himself, Marcus Thorne appeared at Emily's side. "Emily, my dear, I'm sorry to interrupt," the older man said, his voice a low, gravelly hum of old money and influence. He completely ignored Ethan and Sophia. "But the board of trustees is eager for a word. We're discussing the tech integration for the new wing, and your input would be invaluable." "Of course, Marcus," Emily said, turning her back on Ethan without a second glance. The message was clear. She was in a world he could only visit, a world where she was the one being courted by men like Marcus Thorne. He was no longer a player in her game. He was, at best, a spectator. At worst, an irrelevance. As she walked away, a new wave of whispers rippled through the gala. He could feel the eyes on him, the speculative glances, the pitying smirks. The story was writing itself in real time in the minds of everyone present. Ethan Hayes, the rising star of Sterling Corp, had traded in a diamond for a piece of glass. Sophia finally found her voice, a venomous hiss in his ear. "You told me she was no one. You told me she was weak, that she couldn't handle your world. You absolute fool." She pulled her arm from his and stormed away, leaving him standing alone in the center of the ballroom, the fractured golden light of the chandeliers feeling less like a spotlight and more like the harsh, interrogating beam of an executioner. He had come to the gala to cement his status, to show off his new life. Instead, he had walked into a public monument of his own failure, masterfully designed and executed by the woman he had been so certain he had left behind. Triumph was not the word for what Emily felt. As she stood talking to Marcus Thorne and the Foundation's trustees, discussing server architecture and data security for the new pediatric wing, a part of her mind was a cool, detached observer. It noted the tremor in her own hand as she accepted a glass of champagne, the conscious effort it took to keep her breathing even, the way she had to force the muscles in her face to maintain a mask of serene professionalism. Seeing Ethan had been like a ghost limb aching. The pain was a memory, but a potent one, and seeing him with Sophia, that had been a calculated risk. Her team had done the research. They knew Ethan would be here, and they knew who he would bring. The intel was just another data point in a meticulously planned operation. But data could not prepare you for the visceral reality of seeing your past, repackaged and smiling, standing in front of you. The 2 years after the divorce had been a blur of rage, grief, and caffeine. The first few months were the worst. She lived in a small, sterile apartment in Brooklyn, the silence a roaring indictment of her failure. She would wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for Ethan out of habit, her hand meeting only cold, empty sheets. The life she had so carefully curated, the partnership she had invested her entire being in, had been a lie. She had been a feature in his life, not a co-founder. One rainy Tuesday, huddled under a blanket and cycling through the 5 stages of grief for the 10th time, she had stumbled upon a box of her old Stanford research. She pulled out her thesis, its pages soft and familiar. The digital empathy loop. Predictive emotional modeling for proactive wellness. Reading her own words was like meeting a younger, more brilliant version of herself. A woman who believed in the power of technology to heal, who saw code as a form of poetry. A woman Ethan had slowly, methodically erased. A cold, hard anger, clearer and more powerful than the messy grief, began to crystallize within her. He had not just taken her love, he had taken her work, her ambition, her very identity. He had underestimated her. Everyone had. They saw the quiet wife, the gracious hostess. They never saw the architect. That night she wiped the dust off her old laptop and started coding. The idea for Aura Innovations was born from her own pain. She wanted to create something that could anticipate the spiral of anxiety and depression. A digital companion that could offer support not based on generic advice, but on an individual's unique biometric and behavioral patterns. A system that could learn your emotional language and whisper the right words at the right time. She poured every cent she had from the sale of the Westchester house into a prototype. She worked 18-hour days, fueled by black coffee and a burning need to prove him, to prove herself, wrong. She reconnected with old Stanford colleagues, brilliant minds who had been snapped up by Silicon Valley giants. She showed them her prototype, her business plan. They saw what Ethan never had, the visionary. One by one, they left their 6-figure salaries and cushy jobs to join her. Her first CTO, a man named Ben Carter, had been a lead engineer at Google. He looked at her code and said, "This isn't just an app, Emily. This is a new paradigm." They worked out of her Brooklyn apartment, then a cramped co-working space, then finally their own sleek office in Soho. They secured seed funding, then Series A, then a massive Series B round that made the tech world sit up and take notice. Emily was relentless. She was in every meeting. She reviewed every line of critical code. She personally interviewed the first 100 employees. Aura was not just her company, it was the reconstruction of her soul. She learned to navigate the treacherous waters of venture capital, to speak the language of term sheets and valuations. She discovered she had a talent for it. The same intuition that allowed her to anticipate a guest's needs at a dinner party allowed her to read a boardroom, to sense a weakness in a negotiation, to know exactly when to push and when to hold back. The decision to fund the Orion Foundation had been Ben's idea. "Sterling Corp is one of their oldest corporate sponsors," he'd said, showing her the Gala's prospectus. "Ethan Hayes will almost certainly be there. It's the perfect stage." "This isn't about revenge, Ben," she had said, though the thought sent a thrill of dark satisfaction through her. "I know," he'd replied gently. "It's about control. It's about taking the narrative back. You can't build a new future if you're still a ghost in someone else's past." He was right. Tonight was not about destroying Ethan. It was about demonstrating on an undeniable public stage that she was no longer a character in his story. She was the author of her own. A polite cough brought her back to the present. It was Marcus Thorne. "Forgive me, Emily," he said, his shrewd eyes crinkling at the corners. "But I couldn't help but notice the history between you and Mr. Hayes. Sterling Corp has been trying to get a meeting with you for months." Emily took a slow sip of her champagne, her gaze steady. "They have." "He seems surprised by your success," Marcus observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Most men like Ethan are," Emily replied coolly. "They mistake support for submission. They can't comprehend that a foundation can be stronger than the building it holds up." She placed her empty glass on a passing tray. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Marcus, I believe I've made my point for the evening." She turned, leaving him with a thoughtful expression, and began to walk towards the exit. She had done what she came to do. The whispers followed her, a chorus of awe and speculation. She didn't look back at Ethan. She didn't need to. The image of his shattered, ashen face was already seared into her memory. It wasn't a trophy. It was a receipt, a confirmation of a debt that had finally and publicly been paid in full. The rest of the gala was a special kind of hell for Ethan. The air, once thick with opportunity and respect, was now charged with his humiliation. He could feel it in the way old colleagues suddenly found their glasses empty when he approached, the way their wives offered him tight, pitying smiles. He was no longer a predator in this gilded jungle. He was wounded prey, and the sharks were circling. He found Sophia by the French doors leading to the terrace, nursing a cocktail and staring out at the city lights with a thunderous expression. "Are you ready to go?" he asked, his voice strained. She turned on him, her eyes flashing. "Go? Ethan, our entire evening, possibly my entire social standing, just went up in flames, and you want to know if I'm ready to go?" "What do you want me to do, Sophia? Cause a scene?" he shot back, his temper frayed. "She blindsided me." "She didn't blindside you, she outmaneuvered you," Sophia corrected, her voice low and furious. "There's a difference. Did you really think a woman that brilliant would just disappear? That she'd go from writing a thesis on cognitive psychology to sorting your socks and just be happy with it? God, you're more arrogant than I thought." Her words were a direct hit, echoing the silent accusations that were now screaming in his own mind. He had been arrogant. He had been a fool. "She was a different person back then," he mumbled, a weak defense. "No, she wasn't," Sophia scoffed. "You just saw what you wanted to see. You saw a convenient, intelligent accessory who made your life easy, and when it wasn't convenient anymore, you traded her in." Her eyes narrowed. "Just like you're doing with me." The accusation stunned him. "That's not true." "Isn't it? I'm the exciting, ambitious one, right? The one who looks good on your arm at a gala. But what happens in 10 years, Ethan? When my ambition starts to inconvenience you? Will you trade me in for a 24-year-old intern then?" She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Your ex-wife didn't just embarrass you tonight. She held up a mirror. And I don't like what I see." Before he could respond, she pushed past him and walked back into the ballroom, leaving him alone with the cold night air and the even colder truth of her words. He had seen his relationship with Sophia as a passionate, equal partnership. But she was right. He had been using her. He had used her ambition, her youth, and her admiration to validate his own decision to leave Emily. She was a shield against his guilt. And now, that shield was gone. He re-entered the ballroom just in time to see Emily leaving. She moved through the crowd with an effortless grace, nodding to a few people, but her focus clearly on the exit. Her work here was done. She hadn't needed to say a word to him after their initial brutal exchange. Her very presence, her success, was a judgment. As the doors closed behind her, a suffocating sense of loss washed over Ethan, so potent it made him dizzy. It wasn't just the loss of face or the potential professional fallout. It was the sudden, crushing realization of what he had thrown away. He had been married to a queen and had been too blind and too stupid to see her crown. He had complained about the quiet of his palace, longing for the noise of the jousting grounds, and had abandoned his kingdom for a tent. The next morning, the fallout began. His phone buzzed with a message from his boss, the CEO of Sterling Corp. "My office, 8 a.m. The walk into Jonathan Sterling's office felt like a walk to the gallows. The old man was sitting behind his immense mahogany desk, the morning's Wall Street Journal spread before him. A small inside-page article was circled in red ink. The headline read, "Aura of Mystery, Tech's Newest Innovator, Emily Vance, Shines at Orion Gala." "Sit down, Ethan," Sterling said, his voice deceptively calm. He gestured to the paper. "Your ex-wife, I believe." "Yes, sir. The same Emily Vance who is CEO of Aura Innovations. The company you and your team have valued at a pre-acquisition target of $500 million. The company you were supposed to be building a relationship with." Sterling leaned forward, his calm demeanor evaporating. "You didn't just get publicly humiliated last night, son. You've put this firm in an untenable position. How are you supposed to lead a negotiation to acquire the company of the woman you cheated on and left? A woman who, by all accounts, now holds all the cards." Ethan had no answer. Every possible explanation sounded like a pathetic excuse. "I didn't know it was her," he finally said. "You didn't know?" Sterling's voice rose. "It's your job to know. Due diligence, Ethan. Did you not once think to look up the CEO of a company you're planning to bet this firm's reputation on? Or were you too busy whining and dining your new girlfriend to do your homework?" The question hung in the air, a damning indictment. "I want a full proposal for the Aura acquisition on my desk by Friday," Sterling commanded, his voice dropping to a dangerously low level. "It better be the most brilliant, compelling and sensitive pitch this firm has ever produced. You will find a way to fix this. You will get us that meeting, and you will convince her to sell." He paused, his eyes like chips of ice. "Or I will find someone who can. Your career at this firm is hanging by a thread, Ethan. Don't make me cut it." Ethan walked out of the office, his legs unsteady. He was trapped. He was being ordered to go, hat in hand, to the woman he had betrayed and ask her to sell him her soul's work. It wasn't just a business negotiation, it was a penance. And he had a sinking feeling that Emily was about to make him pay for his sins in ways he couldn't even begin to imagine. The next 4 days were a frantic, sleepless blur. Ethan threw himself into the work, driven by a terror he hadn't felt since he was a junior analyst, trying not to get fired. He and his team dissected Aura Innovations from every conceivable angle. They analyzed its market share, its growth projections, its proprietary code, its user engagement metrics. The more they dug, the more daunting the picture became. Aura wasn't just a successful company, it was a masterpiece. Its architecture was elegant, its user interface was flawlessly intuitive, and its predictive wellness engine was years ahead of anything else on the market. It was Emily's Stanford thesis brought to life, a perfect fusion of technology and human empathy. It was brilliant. It was hers. Ethan found himself developing a new, painful kind of respect for her. He remembered the nights she had tried to explain her theories to him, her eyes bright with passion. He had nodded along, his mind already on a morning meeting or a quarterly report, never truly hearing her, never grasping the scale of her vision. He saw that now. He was reading the footnotes of a genius he had lived with and failed to recognize. The proposal they assembled was Sterling Corp's Hail Mary. It was an aggressive, all-cash offer that was nearly 40% above Aura's current valuation. It included promises of full autonomy for her and her team, a seat on Sterling's board, and a massive R&D budget. It was an offer designed to be irresistible, to appeal to logic and ambition over any personal history. It was the only weapon he had. He sent the official meeting request through formal channels, a sterile email from his assistant to hers. He half expected to be ignored or flatly rejected. But 24 hours later, a reply came. Ms. Vance will see you, Thursday, 10 a.m., her office. The Aura Innovations headquarters in Soho was the antithesis of Sterling Corp's rigid corporate tower. The space was open and airy, with polished concrete floors, walls of glass, and living installations of green plants. Young, focused employees typed away at sleek workstations or collaborated in comfortable-looking lounge areas. There was a quiet, productive hum in the air, the energy of people who believed in what they were building. It felt less like an office and more like a high-tech monastery. Ethan felt deeply out of place in his severe dark suit. He was an artifact from another era, a relic of a more cutthroat, less idealistic version of capitalism. He was led to a large conference room with a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. A long, minimalist table dominated the center of the room. At the far end, silhouetted against the window, stood Emily. She was not dressed in a gala gown, but in tailored black trousers and a simple, elegant silk blouse. She looked every bit the CEO. Her CTO, Ben Carter, stood beside her, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp and assessing. "Ethan," Emily said, her voice even as he entered. "Thank you for coming. This is Ben Carter, my partner and CTO." Ethan shook Ben's hand, feeling the man's firm, confident grip. "Mr. Carter, a pleasure. The work you've both done is remarkable." "We think so," Ben said simply, gesturing for Ethan and his two junior associates to sit. Emily remained standing. "We've reviewed your preliminary offer," she began, getting straight to the point. There was no small talk, no pretense. "It's generous. We believe in Aura's potential," Ethan said, launching into his prepared speech. "Sterling Corp has the resources and the global platform to take what you've built and scale it exponentially. We want to put Aura in the hands of hundreds of millions of people to make it the global standard for digital wellness." He laid out the numbers, the market strategy, the synergistic opportunities. He spoke for nearly 20 minutes, his voice gaining confidence as he fell back on the familiar language of business. He was good at this. This was his arena. For a moment, he could almost forget who he was talking to. When he finished, the room was silent. Emily walked slowly from the window to the head of the table and sat down, directly opposite him. She folded her hands, her gaze piercing. "You've built a very compelling case, Ethan," she said. "Your numbers are sound, your strategy is aggressive. It's a good pitch." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But it's based on a flawed premise." "And what's that?" Ethan asked, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. "You assume my goal is global domination," she said. "You assume my primary metric for success is market share, that my end game is to be acquired by a behemoth like Sterling." Her eyes held his. "You're projecting your own ambitions onto me. Again." The final word was a stiletto slid cleanly between his ribs. "Aura isn't just a product to be scaled, Ethan. It's a philosophy. It's about deep, meaningful engagement with a user's well-being. Your model, the Sterling model, is about scale at all costs. You'd want to integrate advertising, sell user data to insurance companies, bundle it with other financial products. You would dilute its soul for the sake of its footprint. We would protect its integrity," Ethan countered, though his voice lacked conviction. Could you? She asked, a genuine question in her tone. Could a shark promise not to hunt? It's your nature. Sterling Corp consumes, it doesn't create. You don't see a vision here, you see an asset. You see a company I built from nothing, and your first, last and only instinct is to buy it, to own it. The subtext was suffocating. She wasn't just talking about the company anymore, she was talking about him, about them. We would make you one of the wealthiest women in the world, Emily, he said, a desperate final volley. Emily smiled, a sad, knowing smile that shattered what was left of his composure. You still don't get it, do you? You still think this is about the money? She leaned forward slightly. I was already a partner in a multi-million-dollar enterprise. It was called our marriage, and I learned the hard way that a silent partnership isn't worth the paper it's written on. She stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Thank you for the offer, Ethan. It's flattering, but Aura Innovations is not for sale. It was a professional execution. She had dismantled his proposal, his company's philosophy, and his entire worldview with surgical precision, all without raising her voice. She had shown him that he was not just personally bankrupt in her eyes, but professionally irrelevant to her future. As he walked out of the Aura offices and back onto the bustling streets of Soho, the city noise seemed distant and muffled. He had gone in there to save his career. He had walked out realizing he had lost something infinitely more valuable years ago, and had only just now understood its worth. The rejection was a death knell. Ethan delivered the news to Jonathan Sterling with the grim finality of a soldier reporting a lost battle. The old man was surprisingly quiet, his disappointment a heavy, suffocating presence in the room. He didn't yell. He simply looked at Ethan with a profound sense of exhaustion. I gave you a chance to fix it, Hayes, Sterling said, his voice raspy. You failed. Ethan was demoted. He wasn't fired. That would be too clean, too merciful. Instead, he was stripped of his title as vice president and reassigned to a portfolio of legacy accounts, a corporate purgatory where ambitious executives were sent to fade into irrelevance. The message was clear. His ascent at Sterling Corp was over. The corner office he had coveted, the power he had worshipped, it had all vanished. The professional humiliation was a constant grinding weight, but it was nothing compared to the personal reckoning that followed. He came home to his sterile, oversized apartment to find Sophia packing her things. There were no tears, no shouting match, just the cold, quiet efficiency of an ended affair. I'm sorry, Ethan, she said, not looking at him as she folded a cashmere sweater into a suitcase. But I can't do this. I'm not her. What does that mean? He asked, though he already knew. She finally turned to face him, her expression a mixture of pity and resolve. I can't be the woman you used to forget the other one. I won't spend my life in her shadow being measured against a ghost, because that's what she is to you now, isn't it? A ghost that's more real than anyone else in the room. She zipped the suitcase with a sharp, final sound. She didn't just beat you in business. She won. She won your respect, and you can't get it back. I can see it in your eyes every time you look at me. She was right. Since the gala, since the boardroom meeting, his perception had fundamentally shifted. When he looked at Sophia, he no longer saw a vibrant, exciting partner. He saw a painful reminder of his own shallow desires, his catastrophic misjudgment. He saw a woman he had used as a prop in a life that had turned out to be a stage play with a collapsing set. After she left, the silence of the apartment was absolute. It was a different silence from the one in his old Westchester home. That silence had been peaceful, nurturing. This one was empty, accusatory. He was surrounded by expensive furniture, cutting-edge technology, and art he'd bought as an investment, but he had never been more alone. For weeks, he moved through his life like a sleepwalker. At work, he performed his duties with a numb, mechanical competence. At night, he drank expensive scotch and stared out at the city, a landscape of lights that no longer represented opportunity, but only the vast, glittering scale of his own isolation. He began to think about Emily, not the powerful CEO, but the woman he had married. He remembered her laughing, a full-bodied, uninhibited sound, as they tried to assemble a piece of IKEA furniture in their first apartment. He remembered the way she would bite her lower lip when she was concentrating on a difficult piece of code, a small habit he had once found endearing. He remembered her hand in his as they walked through Central Park in the fall, the easy, comfortable fit. These memories were no longer a source of guilt, but of a profound, hollow ache. He had not just betrayed a wife. He had abandoned his best friend. He had taken her brilliance, her support, and her love for granted, treating them like a renewable resource he could tap into at will. He had been a taker, a consumer, just as she had said. One night, unable to bear the silence any longer, he sat down at his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could he possibly say? "I'm sorry," was a pathetic, inadequate phrase. It couldn't begin to cover the chasm of his failure. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He knew he didn't deserve it. He didn't make excuses. He had none left. He simply wrote, pouring out the raw, unfiltered truth of his own pathetic discovery. "Emily," he began, "I'm not writing to ask for anything. I know there is nothing left for me to ask for. I am writing because I need to say, for my own sake, what I was too stupid and too arrogant to understand for a decade. I see you. I see now what I was blind to then. I see your brilliance, not as a threat or a tool, but as the core of who you are. I see your strength, not in the way you support others, but in the way you built a world from the ashes of the one I burned down. The greatest failure of my life was not underestimating you as a competitor. It was failing to appreciate you as a partner. I took the best parts of you and used them as a foundation for my own shallow ambitions, and I convinced myself that made me a king. I was wrong. I was just a man living in a house he didn't build, taking credit for its warmth. What you have built with Aura is incredible, not because it's successful, but because it's meaningful. It's a reflection of you. You are changing the world for the better, while I was just trying to own a bigger piece of it." "I don't expect a reply. I don't deserve one. I just needed you to know that I finally see. I see it all." He signed it simply, Ethan. He read it over once, his vision blurring. It was the most honest thing he had written in years. He hit send before he could lose his nerve, then closed the laptop. A strange sense of peace settled over him. It wasn't absolution. It was simply the quiet that comes after a confession. He had finally named his debt, a debt not of money or power, but of character and spirit. It was a debt he could never repay, but for the first time he was willing to live with the consequences. Emily received Ethan's email on a Friday evening. She was in her office reviewing the final schematics for Aura's European server expansion. A small notification popped up in the corner of her screen, and his name was a jolt, an unexpected spectre at the feast of her success. Her first instinct was to delete it, to swipe away this last digital ghost of her past. But curiosity, a trait she shared as both a coder and a woman, won out. She opened it, her expression carefully neutral as she read the words on the screen. She read it once, then twice. The cool, analytical part of her brain passed it like a piece of text, noting the sincerity, the lack of excuses, the raw, unfiltered self-flagellation. It was, she had to admit, a far more articulate and honest message than she had ever thought him capable of writing. But it didn't move her. There was no surge of pity, no flicker of rekindled affection, and certainly no sense of triumphant victory. The woman who might have wept at such a confession, the woman who had yearned for this kind of acknowledgement in the desolate months after their separation, was gone. She had been forged into someone new in the fires of her own ambition and hard work. What she felt instead was a quiet, profound sense of closure. It was like closing a book that she had already read and knew by heart. His apology was the final sentence on the final page. It didn't change the story, but it marked its definitive end. Ben Carter knocked on her open office door. "Burning the midnight oil again, boss?" he asked, leaning against the frame. "Just clearing out the inbox," she said, her eyes still on the screen. He walked over, his gaze catching Ethan's name. his posture tensed slightly. "Everything okay?" "More than okay," she said. She clicked the mouse, dragging the email into the trash folder and then emptying it. The digital file vanished with a soft, satisfying whoosh. "It's finished." Ben looked at her, searching her face, and then a slow, understanding smile spread across his. He had been with her through the worst of it, the nights she'd cried over her keyboard, the days she'd been crippled by self-doubt. He knew what this moment meant. It wasn't about Ethan's redemption, it was about her liberation. "Good," he said softly. "Now, how about we order some Thai food, and you can tell me why my projections for the London launch are too conservative?" She laughed, a real, easy laugh. "They are, you know. You're not accounting for the Q4 wellness surge." As they settled into a comfortable, familiar debate over logistics and projections, the remnants of Ethan's email, of their shared past, faded into complete insignificance. Her world was here, in this office, with people who saw her, respected her, and were helping her build a future. Her past was a closed-off wing of a museum she no longer had any desire to visit. For Ethan, the silence that followed his email was his answer. It was the answer he expected, the one he deserved. There would be no forgiveness, no absolution. There was only the quiet, unrelenting reality of his new life. He sold the cavernous apartment and moved into a smaller place downtown, one that felt less like a monument to a life he'd failed to achieve. He continued his work at Sterling Corp, a ghost in the corporate machine, his days marked by a quiet, diligent competence. The fire of his ambition had been extinguished, replaced by a simple, humbling desire to do a job well. He saw news of Emily from time to time. Aura Innovations was featured on the cover of Forbes. She gave a keynote speech at a global tech conference that went viral. She was named one of the most influential people of the year. Each time he felt a distant, bittersweet pang. It was not jealousy, but a quiet, mournful pride. He had stood next to greatness and had been too blind to see it. That was his story, his penance. He was the man who had failed to recognize the sun. His redemption, when it came, was not grand or dramatic. It was small, internal, and intensely private. It was the slow, painful process of rebuilding a sense of self, not based on titles or acquisitions, but on quiet integrity. It was learning to live with his mistakes, not as a source of shame, but as a defining part of his history that he could not erase, but could perhaps learn from. He started volunteering, mentoring young entrepreneurs at a local incubator, sharing his own story as a cautionary tale against letting ambition curdle into arrogance. He found a quiet satisfaction in helping others build their dreams, a satisfaction he had never found in owning them. He was no longer the king he had once imagined himself to be. He was just a man, humbled and solitary, paying a different kind of debt. A debt to the man he should have been. 2 years after the gala, Emily stood on the observation deck of Aura's newly completed headquarters. The building was a marvel of sustainable architecture, a sleek glass spire that seemed to breathe with the city around it. Below her, the lights of Manhattan glittered, a sprawling network of human connection, ambition, and struggle. The company had just gone public. The IPO had been a staggering success, making headlines around the world. Emily Vance was no longer a rising star. She was a permanent fixture in the constellation of the tech world's most powerful figures. Her life was full, scheduled down to the minute with board meetings, product launches, and philanthropic endeavors. She was surrounded by a team that was fiercely loyal and brilliant. She had friends, she traveled, she was building a legacy that would outlive her. She was, by every conceivable measure, happy. But it was a different kind of happiness than the one she had known with Ethan. Her old happiness had been a shared warmth, a comfortable domestic glow. This new happiness was a brilliant, self-generated light. It was the profound satisfaction of creation, the quiet joy of a life built to her own exact specifications. It was stronger, more resilient. Ben joined her at the railing, handing her a flute of champagne. The rest of their executive team was celebrating inside. "To Aura," he said, raising his glass. "To Aura," she echoed, the crystal clinking softly. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city. "Have you ever heard from him?" Ben asked quietly, not needing to say the name. Emily shook her head. "No, not since that one email." She looked out at the horizon, where the last vestiges of sunset were bleeding into the deep indigo of night. "I heard he left Sterling Corp a few months ago. He's running some non-profit incubator for tech startups now." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Good for him, I guess. A little late for a conscience." "Maybe," Emily mused. "Or maybe it's never too late." She felt a surprising lack of bitterness. His fate was irrelevant to her. His story had diverged from hers so completely that he felt like a character from a novel she'd read long ago. His choices, his path to redemption or ruin, had no bearing on her own. Her redemption had never been about his downfall. It had been about her rise. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. She had reclaimed her name, her work, her power, and her sense of self. "You know," she said, a small smile playing on her lips, "he did me a favor, in a way." Ben looked at her confused. "A favor?" "Emily, he destroyed you." "No," she corrected gently. "He destroyed a version of me. A version that I had allowed to exist. He was the catalyst that forced the real me to emerge." She turned to him, her eyes clear and bright in the twilight. "He thought I was the foundation for his life, something to be built upon and forgotten. But he was wrong." She turned back to the sprawling, glittering city below, her city, her world. "He wasn't the builder. He was just the ground that had to be cleared so I could lay a foundation of my own." The dawn of Aura, her true dawn, had required a long and painful night. But standing here now at the pinnacle of all she had built, she knew with an unshakable certainty that the morning had been worth the wait. And so, Emily Vance didn't just get her revenge, she achieved something far greater: reclamation. She reclaimed her power, her identity, and her future, proving that the ultimate success isn't about tearing someone else down, but about building yourself up beyond their wildest imagination. Hers is a story of resilience, a powerful reminder that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can become the catalysts for our most incredible transformations. What did you think of Emily's journey? Was her cool, professional victory more satisfying than a dramatic, angry confrontation would have been? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story of empowerment and sweet, sweet karma resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. We release powerful emotional stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching.